Hey everybody, สวัสดีครับ Welcome to Beer Times Story, the platform where beer and brewing knowledge is shared. We are back and much more thirsty than ever, and this particularly aligns, perfectly with today's session because we will discuss about beer pilgrimage and the expansion of your palate capability. Now, to me, I find myself from time to time wondering about a few questions whenever I'm about to taste a style of beer or a beer that I have never had before. It could be as simple styles as American Pale Ale or as complicated as Belgium Quadruple. Some of the questions are like, how should the beer supposed to taste like, and does the one that I'm going to have actually represent the right kind of the style of that beer? And what would the beer taste like if I had it right at where it is brewed? You know, this of course neglects the fact of how good or bad that beer tastes. Now speaking of tasting beers, visiting breweries, and exposing one's palate with variety of flavor of beer across the spectrum, I believe that our guest speaker is in the front line of this stage. He's the veteran. He has a long history working in media business since he was a college student, and that was also when he found a love in a non-macro scale beers, and this was back in the mid '90s. And when things were sort of aligned in 2003, he seized the opportunity and co-found the media company called Unfiltered Media Group that dedicates itself to beer and brewing world. Here, he is an editorial of the magazine, producer of video education for brewers, and the host of podcasts, which I listen to a lot. All of this are under one roof, and it is craft beer and brewing. And surely he has tons of stories to share with us. So please welcome our guest speaker, Jamie Bogner.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Jamie, it's good to see you, and it's a pleasure for you to have you on our platform. You know.
Well, I appreciate you paying attention to what we do here and listening in and watching and reading all of the content, stories, videos, podcasts that we create for beer fanatics and brewers, in the English language all around the world. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, I'm a beer fanatic then.
We all are at heart. I still call myself a beer fanatic. I have not lost the joy and passion of beer.
Right. And I mean, if you are into beer, you would always trying to find things to learn, right? And eventually, you're gonna come across to a certain media, certain magazines, and if it's hooked with you, you're gonna ride with them. And for me, it's you guys.
Well, I appreciate that. That's exactly what we want to be. We don't need to be everything to everybody, but we need to be something that people that are truly fanatical about beer and the art of brewing just love and can't live without. And that's our goal, to just be indispensable for true beer lovers.
Right. And I just like the word beer fanatic, right? Yeah, because sometimes people ask me, I'm like, maybe alcoholic. Just on the joke side.
I am a passionate hobbyist. I
How-
no, for me it's a job, and so I do often joke to people that I get paid to drink beer,
Mhm.
which is true, and I
Which
also
is true.
get paid to write about beer and to talk about beer and to interview
Mhm.
people about beer, to design beer related media, magazines, and those kinds of things,
Right.
direct and produce beer related video, and so I am just very lucky to be able to spend so much time creating in a space and a subject that I love, and working with such creative people who are so open to sharing in the brewing world.
It's awesome because the more you're into it, the more you find that people are willing to share and learn together, raising the tide. And I think that's all about creating a good community, right?
That is a culture that has permeated craft beer in this world of brewing
Hmm.
last 15 or 20 years, maybe 20 plus years, and it's something that many serious brewers who I'm good friends with take very seriously, and that is a piece of the culture that no one wants to lose. That
Mhm.
it is, there is competition, but there is also deep cooperation, and that everyone who is brewing beer is not just brewing beer for their brand, they are also brewing for the brand of craft beer. Because for
Mhm.
many consumers, just the phrase craft beer is a brand that they are familiar with. And so everyone who produces beer under that label of craft beer, it all has a responsibility to make high quality beer, beer that's interesting, beer that's technically high quality, beer that captures people's imaginations, beer that creates unique experiences. And it's important that everyone who makes beer and sells it as craft beer is properly representing the bigger idea of what that brand of craft beer really is.
Yeah, I mean it has a deep meaning to it, and it's come with the great share of responsibility too, right?
Lives, livelihoods, entire businesses, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs, around the United States and around the world. Yeah, and so the economic stake of it is very significant, but it's not. That's not the only piece that matters. The passion piece is also the thing that truly matters. That it's not just about making money at it, it's about doing justice to all
Mhm.
of the beautiful craftspeople that have come before in the world of brewing, making beer with integrity, and also pushing that knowledge forward so that future generations can also continue to make beautiful, wonderful, engaging craft beer.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Um, so, like, have you been cooking something or preparing something for the upcoming CBC next week, right?
I just get to go have fun at the Craft Brewers Conference next week. I do a couple of small interviews and work on some things, but it's mostly about seeing friends and then also visiting those folks that sponsor us. Also visiting the and checking out what's new in the this is the time of year when everyone who is, say, naming new hops or releasing a new hop into the market, or releasing a new base malt or specialty malt or new piece of equipment, new format for concentrated hop product or
Mhm.
hop extract. Every new product. This is the time, the season when those are released, and
Mhm.
this is our opportunity to go and not just hear about them, but also taste, smell, see with our own eyes. And beer and all of these ingredients are such a sensory focused thing that being able to rub hops and be able to smell and taste grains, all of these are, it's important to get that kind of sensory experience. And that's what I love about CBC. But I
Yeah.
also truly love the ritual of all getting together, of seeing each other through the World Beer Cup, of judging beer. I'm not judging, but plenty of my brewer friends will be judging, going through these rituals together on a yearly basis. I think that it's it's more important, especially in this post-pandemic era, more important for us to stay focused on being together in
Mhm.
human spaces, doing human things, exploring our own senses, enjoying this community together, sharing beers, looking each other in the eye, clinking glasses,
Mhm.
and having that kind of presence together. It's so important, and it's something that no matter where they put CBC, I will always be there, not for the destination itself, but for the people that will be there, because it's just a fantastic experience. And that's it's also what I love about the Great American Beer Festival, and then as well as all of the events that we produce ourselves, the Brew Accelerator, our Brewers
Right.
Retreat, our
Yeah.
Minnesota Craft Beer Festival, and some of the other things they do. These in-person, yeah, events together are there. It's such a cool, important piece of the
Mhm.
community that is craft beer.
Right. I mean, I can kind of relate it a little bit here because we have like Sea Brew from time to time that hail in our country, and it's not like people coming together, the same crazy head, same tribe, speaking, somewhat same language, and that's kind of a really good time to spend, with the same folk.
One of these
Yeah.
days, I intend to make it to Seabrew, and Joe Stang, our executive editor, has told me stories and has been for the last couple of years, and so
Yeah.
it's on my list of beer events to make because this world of craft beer is a very big one, and it's my goal to explore every single corner of that big world of craft beer.
That's nice. That's nice. I mean, if that actually happened, I'm gonna look forward to, welcome you or greet you somehow in person.
Of course, of course.
All right, Jamie. Before we dive into the session, I have one question for you, like specifically for you. I must admit that you are very kind of a secret guy. There's not much thing that I can find during my preparation for this session. But the actual question is that it is about how you were lured into this world of craft beer and the love and the passion that you express through your media. Do you remember that light bulb moment that you say, this is what I love? Like, can you share me such of a story?
Sure. I have, since I was in elementary and middle school, had a love of art and of music, of architecture, of design, and my personal aesthetic tastes were always a little bit weird. That they were definitely a little outside of the mainstream, and so even in high school, I was a college radio DJ at the local Rollins College radio
Mhm.
station. They needed DJs on the college rock station on Saturday mornings because none of the college kids wanted to wake up at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning. So my best friend and I would DJ even when we were in high school. And, and so I always had this alternative kind of culture, music, art, love. And so I think when I look back at it, I was just never going to be the person that drank crappy beer because I didn't, that was just not how I self identified. And so the moment I would turn to 21 and was able to drink better beer, I started looking into what that meant. It was 1995 when I turned 21, which I turned 50 this year, which is oof,
Still
getting up
young.
there.
Still.
But but even on my 21st birthday, when I was legally able to drink beer here in the United States, terrible. The drinking age should be much lower, but 21 years is the drinking age, and that's a whole nother conversation. But by that very first legal drinking experience, I went down to a bar that had really nice beer, and I believe I was drinking a Red Hook or something along those lines that was craft beer at the time. And so it was just, even from day one of my legal drinking, and then for the rest of college, I was that weird guy that brought the strange beer to the college parties. I remember buying a keg my senior year for a party, and I bought a keg of Pete's Wicked Summer Ale.
Mhm.
And of course, this was 1996, spring of 1996. No one wanted to drink. Like, we're all college kids. No one wanted to drink it. They're like, "Why didn't you just buy Natural Light like
Mhm.
everyone else did?"
Natty light, yeah.
But that was me, and maybe I was insufferable then, and maybe I still am now. But that's and then from that point on, it was always an experience of searching out breweries, looking for these experiences, trying to connect with the places where beer was made. And through the 90s and then through the 2000s, I mean, that was just something that I always did. And it was not something I did for work. It was something I did for pleasure while working in magazines and in media. And I have always worked from the time that I graduated in 1996. I even in 1995, I started my first magazine in my college dorm room, Scatastrophe, ska music magazine, which lasted from 1995 to 1998. And of course, the ska music scene imploded in 1998, and so the commercial proposition for a ska music mag, there was no advertising left, and subscribers were dropping off, and I had to unfortunately close that. But I've launched another magazine after that, and then worked for a sports team in Orlando as an in-house art director. Moved to New York City, worked for basketball magazines, Inside Stuff, and Hoop magazines, the NBA basketball magazines. Worked for American Artist, fine art magazines, and worked for a number of handcraft art and craft magazines. And then connected with my now business partner, John Bolton. And we wanted to take what we learned from working for 8 years plus, 10 years in handcraft focused magazines and media, and wanted to apply that to a subject that we were personally deeply interested in, which was beer and brewing. And this was 2013. And we saw how the craft brewing world was growing, and thought that we could bring something new to the overall media landscape in this world. And the rest is history. We started Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, and then later the Brewing Industry Guide. And then later than that, right around the same time, we launched video classes. And then in 2017, we launched the podcast. And now and I've also run events along the entire way. And now we have a multi-dimensional media company producing media and all that. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Thanks for that. And it seems like you have a good curse since we were young, right? Like, the aesthetic aspect that kind of position yourself in a different direction and just lead you straight to the tasty things, much more than what is, I'm going to say bland, but broader. Yeah.
And it's not just it's something that I've also studied. I within the ska music magazine have written hundreds and hundreds of record reviews, trying to understand what a route for proper criticism is important. I studied at the university. I took 2 semesters of modern art history and criticism. And so I have read some of the best art critics and tried to understand their critical methods, looked at movements in fine art, and I try to take all of that background and apply that, because I'm doing a lot of that same thing within this beer space. I want to be disciplined about it. I want to approach that critical work with the right kind of perspective and broad perspective, a fair perspective, one that engages in different motivations, different levels, and all of the different experiences that different individuals might have in these same kinds of spaces, trying to have a broad understanding of what these things are. And so it's something that I think some people think, oh, you just sit down and you tell people what you think about beer, and they don't consider that, yes, I also continue to read art criticism and understand all the critical methods at play at what we're doing. I don't try to be too scholarly in my actual writing, because that wouldn't fit the tone of what people expect there. But there is a background discipline behind all of that too.
Yeah, it is not as that simple as what people think. Tasting beer is one thing, and you have to translate it to kind of in terms of writing, in terms of the papers that people are going to have to read and understand the mood and tone of how you feel that time is another art form. I would say that. Excellent. Sure. I mean, sure. It's great. It's great. All right, let's just dive to the topics about the beer pilgrimage and the expansion of your palate capability. And Jamie, I think we shall begin with a simple and important questions. According to your opinion, how could one know how each style of beer is supposed to taste like?
I think that presupposes a argument that we probably need to throw out from the very start, because what it's supposed to taste like is often, it's much more broad of a question than that. I don't love the idea of beer and beer styles as a monoculture. I think that beer, even when we, and we see this pretty often. Americans have this interesting fascination with style guidelines. We love style guidelines for some reason, and because we also love competition, and so that I think those two things, especially within the world of home brewing, which has spawned a lot of the professional brewers in the United States now, as opposed to Europe, where you go to university and you come out with a degree and then you get a job at a brewery. It's had been a much more regimented kind of career path in America. A lot of those folks that started breweries and our brewers started as home brewers, and home brewing was about brewing to specific styles and style guidelines and having a competition. And Americans, we love to compete. Lots of people love to compete. And you have to have a common basis in order to have a competition. You have to have rules. I totally understand all of that. But I think one of the things that gets lost in that conversation is the idea that those rules, the style guidelines that we have been written by individuals who are attempting to describe things that commercially exist, and they are trying to create a definition from all of these things and find commonality. And so when you describe a Belgian strong dark ale, like, what is that? Well, these are some examples of it. Well, what are it's meant to reflect what those creators have been doing in that, and I think that unfortunately, oftentimes that then becomes more of a dogma than it should be. It is a reflection. It should not always be the direction. The brewers should make the beers that they want to make, and they should make them in the way that they feel driven to make them. And they shouldn't feel like everything has to be to style, because to style it's not a thing. It's only for use in competition like that. And so understanding what something should taste like, I think, rather than thinking like, does this fit this one idea of what this can be, I think you start by asking some simple questions. Like, I think about distractions. You can call things off flavors or mistakes, or you can call them attributes. Various people in various industry capacities have defined those as attributes, right, to take the negative meaning out of them. But I find that if I taste something like diacetyl or acetaldehyde, one of these elements of a beer, and it's at a level where I'm distracted from it, well, that's going to reduce my pleasure. And so if it reduces my pleasure because I'm distracted by it, then the beer is not really achieving its goal, right? And so then, that's probably something that I would steer away from. And so finding a beer that's then technically technically good, well made, and that's a separate question then from, are there interesting ideas behind this? And what are how are they making this different, unique, compelling? Are there certain edges of flavor? Is there a certain texture and mouthfeel? Does the balance hit right between bitterness, between dryness, sweetness? But does that sweetness serve some other element, like highlighting, some other characters? And so I try to think about all of those things in concert with each other. They all impact each other, because that's what creates this kind of gestalt, this kind of holistic view of all of these things together. It's and I do find from time to time we have to coach up some of our beer judges, especially those that come out of professional capacities, because within many breweries, sensory panelists are taught to find flaws, and and so you end up in a mode where you are a flaw finder. And it is a different, and that is good. Breweries need that. You want to be the most critical of your own beer, and you want to find everything that could possibly be wrong with it, even if that is below threshold for normal people and other people aren't going to experience it. If you can, find that, great. Then you can at least decide, is this enough of a problem for us to need to do something about this? But that's a different question than, is this beer great?
Right.
Or does this beer fulfill my expectation for what this should be? And of course, where did that expectation come from? That's a very flexible, kind of concept there. So, but I think that it's important not to just try to find everything that's wrong in a beer. It's also important to focus on, are there interesting ideas behind it? What are they trying to achieve? Do I find these flavors interesting and pleasurable? Is this something that I like to drink? If I don't like to drink it, or it's challenging to me, is that challenging in a way that I'm just not ready for? Or is that challenging in a way that maybe that's a bad idea? Like, there is music that I listen to. I may listen to, a speed metal band or a prog metal band. My wife would think, well, that's terrible. And it doesn't mean that that band is objectively bad. It simply means that her taste is very different than mine. And, yet also within that scope, there is good prog metal and there is some just okay. And sometimes kind of not so great, you know?
Yeah.
And so, you have to separate then what this personal taste idea versus some objective quality, and, and be able to pursue that. But, so that's maybe how I would phrase that. It's hard to understand what beer should taste like, because beer should taste like lots of different things. And anywhere that you go where they make beer, even within a regional style, whether that's, Bavaria in Germany, whether that's the Czech Republic for Czech lagers, whether that's northern Germany for whether that's different regions, Flanders in Belgium, whether that's London versus the Midlands in England, like every even within these regions, you find so much range, you find so much more diversity, and so our style guidelines compact all of those things down into a much tighter range than they naturally exist in.
Right.
And finding that broad range, I mean, it becomes, and I think that's why I enjoyed how you've set up this idea for the theme of this episode, that experience of beer in these places becomes the most important thing, because it helps you understand the breadth of what is being made in these places, that it is not just everyone trying to achieve one thing, that there are these beautiful and often different expressions of these similar families of things, and they're all valid in their own, they all can be valid in their own ways.
Right, right. I think, well, I mean, what you have mentioned is so it contains a lot of meaningful things. Like, okay, I also kind of agree that the style guideline, maybe people take it too far, but it can be a really good start if you want to try to understand things like briefly, or at least just to put you into the right direction. But the rest, you just have to explore yourself and kind of try to learn and try to develop your palate along the way. I mean,
to use an art metaphor, some of the best abstract artists and painters and sculptors also studied as figurative painters and sculptors and artists first. They understand the classical rules of composition, of color, of shape and balance, of light and dark, of cool and warm, and light and shadow. And they understand all of these concepts, and it's only through understanding all of these that you can truly move beyond them And so having that kind of fundamental understanding of what the general ballpark should be around these kinds of things, how beer is made, what can create some of the things that you might be tasting in it, I think helps you understand and appreciate. And if you are a brewer, understanding how other people do this and what the kind of middle line, that median line through an expectation of a style here is, that lets you think about, where do I want to be on that? What do I think, the possibility is? Because you can take that and then decide, well, I think within this, when I'm making beer for my local audience, they would like this to be similar, but a little more this or a little more that, or maybe I think this could be really interesting if we bumped up a little more of this thing. And then you make it your own, and you make it something that that then takes that style and takes that, this idea of what that beer can be, and makes it something that isn't just a copy. It's your own edition of that.
Got it, got it. And I mean, to the end, it has to be a good beer. I mean, to catch the people attention, and to make people enjoy it. And I think, as a follow-up questions, because I find that it is kind of what I can imply is that, to somewhat extent, it is kind of important to taste the beer that is still in a good shape and form. And for your work, I know that you have been traveling a lot, not just domestically, but also internationally, to talk to brewers, brewing scientists, and of course, taste beer. So the next question is, does it really matter to sample the beer right from the origin, its source, like the breweries, the tap room, based on your opinion and experience?
Yes and no. I think that there are some beer styles that travel very, very well. And some of those styles you can enjoy just about anywhere, and it'll be a very similar experience to the way that same can or bottle of beer left the brewery itself. And then there are some of those styles of beer where they just will never be the same, and they get worse and worse the further away from, the more days away from the brewery you get. And then you have this other class, especially when it comes down to pale and hoppy beers, where the worst thing you could possibly do is put those on a ship and
Warm ship.
and ship them overseas and have them arrive, months later with no temperature control. I mean, and they just end up being shells of themselves. And it's what's really and truly funny is how so many brewers' ideas about what beer should taste like is actually conditioned by the shape of that packaged beer after it arrives from shipping on a ship versus when you drink it there. And so I think that has been one of the most amazing things. I mean, at first it was amazing for American lager brewers, to taste the way that, like, a fresh German Pilsner actually tastes in Bavaria versus the way that same hoppy Pilsner tastes by the time that it got to America, which was maybe a little bit cardboard and, definitely stale and dulled. And, and then when you taste it in, fresh, in its environment, you realize, wait, this is a different beer than I always thought that this beer was. And what's truly funny is now we've even seen European brewers making versions of American IPAs and American pale ales that taste like the versions that sat on a ship, and and now have dull hops and oxidative notes, and it's all changing because, again, more and more of those brewers have been able to come taste, say, a West Coast IPA in San Diego from some of the great San Diego brewers brewing those kinds of beers, or a dank IPA from Portland brewer or a beautiful, juicy, fruity, hazy IPA from a brewer in Massachusetts. And when you have those those very delicate styles of beer, that can go wrong so quickly because those hops, like it or not, are very fragile flavors. When you taste them where they are and you taste them fresh in a beer that's been handled well, especially directly from that brewery, it's a whole different experience, and it
Right.
absolutely changes the way that you think about that beer and those flavors and all of those things together. So from that perspective, I think that it's absolutely priceless to experience beer in that way, just to be able to understand how those flavors are intended by those brewers that are creating it, also to see the context of it, and then of course also to register what that experience is and understand the even bigger context in which local audiences actually drink that beer, with food, with the environment, with the smell of the forest that surrounds the city, whatever that is. All of those are contexts that have always been worked into beers themselves, and they make sense to a local audience. And they, if you take that out of context just by buying a bottle, it's not quite the same. Like, there's something really special about seeing it and being there, and being able to file away all of that sensory experience.
Yeah, and I have one story to share you. It's about like you mentioned that some of the European brewers try to brew like American Pale Ale and try to match the flavor profile with what they got from that what's available in their country, right? And I remember a story from probably the Brewing Network back then, maybe like 5-6 years ago. There was a Australian homebrewers in Australia. They were trying to do a clone of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and they did that, and they compared it with the Pale Ale. I mean, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale in their country, right? It's not the same. And the guy was like, I'm trying to develop my beer to taste the same as for what they have. And when there is the US person in Australia taste his beer and compare to what he got from the shop, it's like, dude, this is kind of a stale, man. And so this is kind of a thing. If you set foot in that path without not knowing how it's supposed to taste like back home at its source, it's totally a different thing for a certain style. I mean,
It absolutely is. And so it's great from that perspective to be able to taste the freshness.
yeah,
But I also think that being there helps you understand the overall context of why a brewer created a beer with
yes,
those flavors in that place and in that way. Because especially when we look at historical beer styles, beers are a product of the place. And
mhm,
so, German brewers were brewing with, I mean, you think about brewing in the 1800s, it wasn't as if you just, call up the factory or dial up the internet and place an order and all the ingredients come to you. I mean, it just doesn't happen that way. You brew with what's close to you.
right,
And so you brew with grain that's close to you, you brew with hops that are close to you. And so every beer becomes, historically, when we look at these European styles, every one of those beers is a product of the place that it's from, that used the ingredients that were grown around it. And it's made with those things, made with the water profile of whatever that town was, because that was the local thing. And so, being there and being able to understand it, being able to drink the tap water, and then also taste the beer and understand, like, oh, well, yeah, now I totally understand why beer styles developed in this way in this place, because they're all driven by the way that the agriculture and the way that all the ingredients around us, in that place exist. And so, that's this bigger, beautiful context to all of this. And it's also something that so many now craft brewers are also embracing in every part of the world, finding ways to make beers with their local ingredients in a way that makes sense within their context and in their communities. And I think that's what I find most exciting about, the next 20 years of beer, that as that continues to filter out, and more brewers build these techniques for making great beer and are able to think about it in their own context with local ingredients, like how can I work these things in? More of these become like there's so much interesting development and different things that brewers will make then in the next 20 or 30 years, as more of that technical ability continues to improve everywhere, but also that focus on local ingredients and even building ecosystems, economic support for growers to help grow these things, whether that's hops, whether that's malt, whatever these beer ingredients are, various fruits and other things, using native yeast, all these create these experiences. And, and I think that's an exciting thing. And it's why it will continue to be interesting. It's why I will continue to seek out every corner of the world of craft brewing, because there are so many interesting things happening in every corner of it.
Of course, localizations and building the community is always good things. I mean, yeah, and I think we can kind of have a mutual agreement that the beer pilgrimage is part of the process to expand one's palate capability, of course. And so, Jamie, for the Craft Beer and Brewing magazine, right, it released quarterly, like 4 issues per year, and in every issue, you guys gonna have a dedicated content which you and your team will taste countless amount of beers. I don't know how do you guys do that, but based on the selected beer styles for that issue, then you're going to publish tasting result. This is the example of one of them. And so now, in order to do so, I think it is kind of important for the tasters, your team, to have a well-trained palate to deliver the best result. So let's talk about the process of developing one palate's tasting capability according to the Craft Beer and Brewing way. How do you guys do that?
How do you do it? Well, I will say first we have the beer judge certification program, and so there's a testing apparatus that tests both your ability to taste and your ability to describe these flavors. We make sure that every one of our judges has been tested, has gone through the beer judge certification program and is certified as a beer judge, or gone through the Cicerone program, a similar program meant to build beer knowledge, and is a certified Cicerone. And so we set that baseline of knowledge for all of our judges. All of our judges judge completely blind. I just want to keep saying that, they don't know what they are drinking when they are judging these beers. Exactly. They're tasting it in a glass, and we now use computers instead of paper. That was we're much more efficient about it now than the photo you have. But the funny thing about that photo is that there in the upper left hand corner is Neil Fisher, the founder of WeldWorks Brewing here in Colorado. Okay. Yeah. Before he launched the brewery, when he was a member of our blind judging panel, and and he had an amazing palate then, and he has an amazing palate now, and he's obviously a very successful brewer these days. But that was very early days for in that picture that you have right there. But I love it. I love the memories of that. In order for some of those folks that are there who to train their palates, they went through lots of guided study, beer tasting, going to study for that beer judge certification test. They've tasted lots of commercial examples of different beers, quizzed themselves on them blindly, and tasted ingredients. They understand individual hops and the contribution that those different hops make. And they understand the different impacts of fermentation and different types of fermentation, different yeast impacts. And so that is there is a curriculum that the beer judge certification program has for that they would all follow. But most of those judges have spent months and months going through that curriculum, doing that kind of quizzing and studying and trying to build that knowledge, in order to be able to get through that certification test, which is, fairly rigorous. And, and so that is one way in which all of our judges pursue it. Um, and again, they'll go style by style through the style guide. Here's one area where the style guide can actually be useful and helpful, in that it lists different commercial examples of some of these that were part of what determined, the creation of that style. And so you can go back, and if you can access and find those beers, then you can buy those beers and you can taste those beers and help, build some understanding as to what each of those are. And so approaching that style by style and understanding some of the key styles, across the beer spectrum can, you help build just a baseline understanding of that. And then if you want to get into all of the fine points of difference within all of these, you can kind of develop out from there. But that's a more academic approach for judges that are simply trying to be good judges and be able to, understand this whole scope. And I think that every one of them found that it didn't just help them be a better judge; it also helped them be a better brewer, because that discipline of understanding, what does black patent malt actually taste like, and what is that taste that I'm tasting when I chew some in my mouth versus what actually goes through into a final beer. How does that impact, understanding how the inputs create the outputs. That's a process that helps people build deeper knowledge around that.
Got it. And do you guys do like the off flavor training too, like the tinctures of small, I don't know, example of off flavor, or that depends on how each individual try to find their own path?
We have done that training before, yes. And in fact, at every one of our brewery accelerator events, we do a similar tasting event where we, try to we focus on building a sensory palate, being able to understand those attributes, positive and negative within beer, especially negative, because you do want to, understand what those off flavors are. But more importantly, and I'm calling them off flavors when they're really attributes. And so, again, I hate using some of that negative, pejorative terminology for it. But having said that, it's also interesting and useful to profile yourself and to understand what your palate is, because everyone is different when they taste. And that doesn't mean that anything goes. It just means that some things that are really off-putting to you may not be that off-putting to someone else, and vice versa. There are some things that I am highly sensitive to, and there are other things that don't bother me. I don't get bothered by DMS. It just doesn't bother me. But if diacetyl is past a certain threshold, I can sense it. And with something like acetaldehyde, I have a very low threshold for it. And, and it becomes pretty impactful pretty quickly, as well as scaling compounds. But knowing that about yourself and being able to understand how you taste versus how other people taste is also really interesting. I have loved, over the course of our blind reviewing process, being able to understand how even multiple trained tasters could be so different in the way that they might taste something. I remember two of our judges got in a 15-minute argument over one beer because in judging it on a 50-point scale, 0 to 50, they were 15 points apart.
Wow.
Which, for judging, you want to be a maybe, 7 or 8 at the most, and really not any more than that. And so they were 15 points apart. Now that is a humongous gap. And they could not close it. They were so dead. Each one, like I said, they argued for 15 minutes. And there was one of I still talk about it, even though this is at least 9 years ago now. But they're both right. It's not like someone's right and someone's wrong. They both just had a different context to approach that from, and what felt like it was medicinal or synthetic or extract based to one The other didn't get that same kind of edge, and they felt like it was just rich and silky and intense, and had that kind of character. And so, but there's the thing. I think that we try to really look at beer from the perspective of more people, and that's why there's two judges, actually two scoring judges plus me tasting every beer. And some of us, like, I don't score beers because I know what they are, but I will, if I taste something that our judges have tasted and it was like they gave it an okay score and it's like obviously flawed, we'll just kick that out. I mean, there are some of those cases where it takes the things that do best are the things where everyone agrees, that consensus where it all comes up together like that. There's some power to that. And I think, that's also what's interesting about competition judging in the same kind of way, that it's this consensus that tends to create like the things that everyone can get behind, or the things that that rise up. And so there's value to taking that approach to it.
Yeah, and I think that the one that you point out is that each individual has their own taste, and it is very important to know what you are kind of susceptible to. What is your low threshold camp? What is your high threshold camp? And then you can shape yourself into that much better form. And it is also important to know that what you sense is not always going to be the same as what other people sense, and it is okay to discuss about it. It's not right or wrong, right?
On top of that, it gets even more complex. The more time I spend tasting beer critically, the more I realize that my own palate changes. That, based on what I've eaten, what my body chemistry is like on a certain day, if I am dehydrated for whatever reason, like I may taste beer very differently. If I've been exercising, I will taste beer differently. If I've had certain foods, I will taste beer differently. If my blood pressure is higher that day, I will taste beer differently. From that perspective, I have a healthy distrust even in myself and my own palate, to where I will never claim to be right about something only to have experienced it that way at the moment that I experienced it that time. And I think that it's also useful to, I try to be very careful about that then, in not implanting ideas that are going to stick with me when I have a lower amount of confidence in them. And so, for that reason, I try to taste things in different contexts. Have a brewery might send me beer in a can, but I love also drinking that beer fresh at the brewery. I tried that with a beer that I had a beer in Massachusetts from a well-known hazy IPA maker who I was just curious because every can I'd had, I didn't think that it measured up to the rating that it had on Untapped. I was like, well, is that just the can that came to me, or is that just me, or is that something else? And so had it on draft at the brewery a couple of weeks ago. Like, no, it still tastes the way that it did in the can. Like, okay, that's the beer. And maybe then it's just me, or maybe they are using some ingredient there that hits me in a way that other people don't experience, whatever that is. But at least I know that it's not the way that it was handled. And being able to, taste these things in these different contexts, it's important in that way, again, to, to have that, bigger, broader understanding of this. And so, useful in that perspective.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And, this is kind of the paving the way to the pilgrimage part that we're going to discuss, which is the tail end of this session. And I'm sure that you have been visiting tons of breweries in many countries, over the years, right, Jamie? So I know that the pilgrimage kind of teaches you things a lot, but can you just give us some example of, the moment that you kind of realized something during your trip to various places?
I have realized so many things over so many years. But it's the beautiful thing about my job is I get to now create my own travel schedule and go to the places that I want to go, and have try to explore and have these experiences. And and I try to select those that are going to make broaden my own perspective. And I still have so many places to go and so many of those experiences to have. um but going to Belgium for the first time in 2022 was absolutely eye-opening. Going to, or actually, I guess I went to Belgium for the first time in 2018. That was absolutely mind-blowing, eye-opening, even though it was a very short trip. Going back in 2022, helped, give me so much more broad understanding of the breadth of what Belgian brewing is. You start going around and realizing how, just, oh, everyone drinks triple here. Okay. That it just felt like another, one of the many styles that, that we think of in terms of Belgian beer here in America. Is like, no, it's really just all triple. And then there's occasional things that other people drink. Going to the Czech Republic last year, and going and hanging out in the cellars of Pilsner Urquell. What a beautiful experience! Amazing tasting what open fermented, barrel fermented, Pilsner Urquell or Czech Pale Lager tastes like. Going to Unatica and being able to taste their open fermented, Czech Pale Lager. Understanding how these different characters then develop within these Czech Pale lagers that those lagers are known for, all absolutely priceless and completely changed the way that I started thinking about beer. And then of course going to Bamberg and Franconia, which is part of Bavaria but very different. Like Bamberg lager is very significantly different in Franconia versus say Munich lager. And so they're not that far away from each other. And yet you realize, 2 or 3 hours. Well, it's 3 hours from Bamberg to Prague. Like, those are different beer places and over a course of 3 hours, and of course, Munich's about 3 hours south of Bamberg. Like, it's very, small distances create some pretty, significant differences. But then of course, the lagers in Franconia are beautiful and very different from the kind of idea of what Bavarian lager is that some key, say, American craft lager brewers have pulled and have put forward. And again, it's not that they're not wrong. It's not that this is not the way. Yes, that's a beautiful expression of lager. And there's also, these other 4 or 5, all of these other also good, interesting, but different ways to make really great lager in the similar kind of tradition, but in a way that may taste different than what we, the one idea that we had for it. And so being able to embrace that kind of multiplicity and that diversity, even within a place, understanding Saison in Belgium, like it's very different depending, again, because that's beer from the land, typically speaking. But you don't truly comprehend and understand it until you get there. Or then, Lambic and Gueuze, being able to see all of the different ways. Yes, that's one family, but thinking about it just in like what's good and what's bad is such an overly simplified way of looking at it, versus how does what they make express their approach to making it in the way that they do in the terroir they're in. Is that interesting? And do I reconnect with that? I think about it in wine terms. When you go to a winery, you have an experience of drinking the wine. You're looking at the vineyards outside of the winery tasting room. You get this beautiful experience, and every time you go back and taste that wine, that you buy wine, you take it home, you drink that again. Well, it's going to transport you back, and you're going to be standing right there in the tasting room again every time you take a sip of that wine that you're now drinking. And I think of Gueuze the same way. Like, when I drink Gueuze, I'm going back to that cellar and back to that place and thinking about this memory, and that cellar must and the kind of, and the funkiness and the the old Brussels building of Cantillon, and the weird louvered shutters and crap that's all around the cool ship there, and then the giant motor noises you hear even when they're, I mean, it's, there's just so much of that sense of the place that I enjoy, that it carries me back to that.
Mhm.
And having that experience of sight and sound and smell and sense in general in that place where that beer is made, now when I drink it in a bottle, it hits different. It gets me in a different kind of way, and it takes me back to that place. And I love that part of it. I love that beer, wine, all of these can be so transportative in that way. They are a
Mhm.
way of continuing to travel even after your travel is done, because you have such strong connections of sense and memory. You taste them again and it takes you right back to where you were.
Right. So it's, yeah, definitely the pilgrimage is about the beer as the superstar, but then you can culture, broad array of the environment that surround you, and that enhance the experience that you can have with that place as well. And that connection word that you mentioned is is true. I mean, like, you can really connect yourself to the beer, to the people, to the breweries, to the culture over each place that you've been to.
You smell the smells, you smell the trees and the flowers, you smell the air. All of these are the same kind of senses that you are using to experience the beer.
Mhm.
Um, taste, same kind of thing. I will always think now about the Hermelin, pickled cheese every time I drink Czech Pale Lager. I mean, because they're just inseparable. It's like every time I now drink a Czech Pale Lager, it's like I want some pickled cheese with that. Like that's just my bar food. And then the fantastic Czech pickled peppers, like all of these things, they all just run together, and it's like, oh man, I think about sitting in this warm pub drinking very inexpensive beer after beer after beer, with
Mhm.
these little jars of pickled cheese, and just spending a night without being on my phone and just talking to the people around me. It's like such good memories. And like now, even, I when every time I have that a Czech Pale Lager or something similar, like it brings me back to that.
Right.
It's such a, you know, it's what's important about life. The
Yeah.
experiences are what's important about life. We can't take anything with us, but we can have these experiences and enjoy what it means to be human.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of touching. And as the follow-up questions for this beer pilgrimage, like, say when you were in Prague or Czech Republic, you had this wonderful experience. You captured the moment. And for example, like, you came back home, right? Does it set your benchmark like differently on how you view Czech beer that was brewed in US or elsewhere, or you have to kind of separate it when you taste the beer now?
You could ask my friend Eric at Cohesion in Denver, who brews Czech style lager, because I came back and I was pretty mean to him after that. I just no, he brews amazing beer, just incredible
Right.
beer, and I anyway, I think his beer is even better now, as they've continued to develop it.
Hmm.
But I think the biggest folks that were the source, then they will absolutely agree with me on this, were my local bartenders at the beer bar in Fort Collins, Tap and Handle, who
Hmm.
have a Lucre tap and they serve lager on a side pull tap. And like now I am one of the very few people that wants as much foam in my glass as they will give me. I want foam. I need
Right.
a good stand of foam on my lager. And so many Americans they want more beer, they want to get their money's worth. And like, no, no, no. I don't care about that. Just give me a lot of foam. I need the foam. And and so anyway, it's that. I think I was um, I would heckle them when they wouldn't pour me enough foam, and now they always pour me enough foam.
So at least it's kind of shaped the way you think about beer in somewhat extent after the each pilgrimage, but it depends on how much you're gonna apply it or relate it into your daily life, I would say.
I try not to be a jerk about it. I try to, give people grace, and I try to ask for what I want. And then if they don't do it, ask again and try to, tell them how I want. Yeah. And help coach everybody along so that everyone understands. And over now, they get it. It's not just about it being exactly like it was there. Obviously, we're Americans, we're making beer in America. Like, it's going to be a little different. And, those brewers brewing these styles, it should reflect, not just, it shouldn't just be a carbon copy of one brewery's beer in the Czech Republic. It should be their own expression of that and what they are trying to achieve, and making a similar expression in the same way that, even within the Czech Republic, there are very different brewers taking on pale lager in significantly different ways from each other. And so, you find your own place within this big spectrum of brewing. And so it's, I try to do it from a perspective of support and love rather than of negative and criticism and being unhappy, that it's more about all of us, building better experiences here.
Got it. Awesome. I mean, like, all the trips. I mean, for myself, I haven't been to a lot of countries, but I've been to US before, been to Japan, Singapore, and each place, like what you say, they are different in all means. Food, culture, people, beer, of course. And if I'm in US, right, I want to experience, say, West Coast, I'm going to choose to go to, California, San Diego, LA, or San Fran, Santa Rosa. And from my experience, for my my own memories, during those kind of trip, when I had something like super great, it's kind of imprinted in my memories. And then I'm going to start thinking about, how am I going to apply this back home? How am I going to improve myself into a much better shape and form, right? So the area that I have my eyes next is in Europe, and I really want to go there and explore and expand my palate, because I have so much love and passion over, like, the Cask Ale, Real Ale, and all those beautiful beer at German, Belgium, Czech Republic. So still have to look forward for that. And the story that you share is priceless for me, and I hope for our audience as well.
I try now to get to Europe twice a year if I can, and I am thankfully in a lucky position where other people will sometimes pay for that travel, and so I am actually heading to Belgium again in about 12 days.
12 days.
And I'm excited. After CBC, I'm home for 4 days, and then I'm leaving for Belgium. And so
That's great. That's great.
After a while, I will tell you, sometimes I should probably take a little bit of a break on the travel. That will be my, I think that'll be my eighth or ninth trip so far this calendar year.
Oh God.
But having said that, I'm looking forward to the experience. I always am seeking out different things than I've done before in order to, again, build to that knowledge, see, new breweries, new changes to old breweries, and all of these kinds of, there's something that's beautiful about it. And I also, I love being able to do this because I love beer and I love the people that make beer. And so it is part work, but it's also a lot of enjoyment as well.
I mean, as a beer fanatic, we always find things to do, and we love doing it too. Yeah. Jamie, I think we are at the tail end of this session. Do you have any final says about, this pilgrimage and the expansion of our palate capability?
Just get out there and do it and explore. I think it is what so many of us who are attracted to craft beer enjoy about the nature of this, of finding new things, having new experiences with old things, and being able to appreciate this long history of beer, as well as all of these beautiful, more recent expressions of this long history. The culture is so interesting and deep, and as well as new. It's not just about old things. There's so much new and excitement, and especially for your audience in Southeast Asia, um, keep making great beer, keep creating new and different experiences, and create a culture of your own, because our we what we don't need is a bunch of beer cultures that are simply copying Europe. The beautiful thing was, a lot of American beer culture did that for a long time, and now America is a net cultural beer exporter, where there's interest around the world in the styles of beer that American brewers have developed and created, from West Coast IPA, hazy IPA, pastry stouts, fruited kettle sours, all of these things that have come out of this kind of approach to innovation. And I can't wait to see the kind of innovation and development that happens as more and more brewers around the world embrace this within their local contexts. And I want to see more of that happen, because I want more reason to go visit everywhere.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome closing, Jamie. So, I mean, thank you so much for your time. It is a great honor, and then to hear about your experience, your view about this particular topic. And after this talk, I think I have to work harder, to move my next beer pilgrimage trip in a much sooner than what I think from my original plan, and can't wait for that. And if you ever gonna have a chance to come to visit your friend Joe Stange here, we are happy to open our house and show you around our place and our showroom.
Well, I appreciate that, and you should definitely talk to Joe also. He
Yes.
has as many, if not more, beer experience. Especially having lived in both Berlin and Brussels, and been much more of a world traveler than I have. His experience is also priceless, and he's actually going to be joining me in Belgium
Oh, in
in
the next episode. Yeah.
right after CBC. So I love traveling in Europe with Joe. He's the absolute best. So, but I intend to get there before their post is up in Bangkok and come see it. So when I do, I'll let you know for sure.
Got it. Sure. I mean, he's in the list, and I think we're gonna see him soon, maybe in the next 2 months. Let's see. Yeah. All right then.
Great.
I mean, in the meantime, take care. I hope you enjoy CBC and also the upcoming soon Belgium trip.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me on to talk about beer here. It's something I love to talk about, and normally I'm the one asking the questions. So I enjoy answering the questions and being able to talk my heart out.
Of course, that's good. This is a space for us and space for you too. We share the same passion, we share the same love, and I think it is a great thing to talk about too.
I agree. Cheers.
All right, cheers. Thank you. Take
Thanks.
care.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye. There you have it. Expanding your palates based on one of the, I think, forefront beer tasting veteran, and the guy that is in, I would say, not a battle, but in the field where he has seen things, he has experienced a lot of things, he has done a lot of traveling, and you see that he's still seek and eager to find the moment, to find the place, to find the opportunities for him to, I would say, sharpen his own palate, to put himself into new things, learn things. So it is kind of a continuous learning. And as always, if you have love for beer, if you are a beer fanatic, if you're a beer enthusiast, if you love drinking beers, experiencing it and show your appreciation over it is something that I think is really, really important to express and to do out there. So I hope if you find time, if you have enough, I would say financial support, do yourself a favor. Go out there, experience things, and you would definitely find a lot of benefit and takeaway that would gonna shape the way you gonna submerge yourself more into this beer appreciation concept. All right, so I say that like what I said, my next beer pilgrimage is going to be much more interesting than the previous one, and it's always been like that. So find your own groove, do your things, drink good beers, find a moment to experience much better things for your life. And for today's sessions, we're gonna say goodbye here, and we're gonna be back in probably a couple of weeks. So see you around. But in the meantime, cheers. Take care. Sawasdee krap.